Howdy. Hey, Raphael.
Is everybody okay?
Yeah.
All right.
We're good.
Mr. Rushkoff Douglas, this is a real honor because you've been writing about this stuff for decades. As I said, you're in the pantheon up with Levy and Seabrook, of folks who have seen the future and brought it back to us. This latest book was kind of a bait and switch. It seems from the cover that you went in like Elon Musk's secret submarine where he keeps his harem and his guns, and like wrote about like the experiences of the super rich trying to escape from apocalypse. But that's not exactly what happened. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and where it came from?
Well, yeah, I was one of the early internet people, like late 80s. My first book on internet culture was canceled in 1992 because Bantam thought the internet would be over by 1993 when the book was supposed to come out. So it was that sort of period. Championing digital culture, and then watching a bit chagrined as Wired magazine came along and reframed the digital renaissance as the revival of the NASDAQ stock exchange. And we looked at how do we turn these technologies from ways of empowering people to be more creative together to ways of making people behave more predictably. So instead of looking for exploits in the computers like we did when we were hackers, companies started looking for exploits in human beings the way behavioral finance people do. So, and then with algorithmic power. But I often get mistaken for a futurist because if you're a presentist and see what's going on the ground, most wealthy people aren't even watching that. So you say what's happening now, then they go, oh my God, you were right. It's like, yeah, okay. So I'm a futurist and I get called to do these talks, which I try not to do, but if they pay enough, I do. And I got offered a third of my salary as a CUNY professor to go speak about the digital future to a group of tech investors way out in the desert. They flew me out business class and drove me 3-4 hours, into the desert until I see like G5s landing next to me. And it's like, oh, we're here. And I get taken in a little golf cart to my green room, and I'm getting ready to do my normal sort of intellectual dominatrix act to the wealthy tech elite, because they like it on every level. And instead of miking me up and taking me out to speak, they bring these 5 guys into the green room who sit around this little table and start peppering me with all these questions about the digital future, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, virtual reality, augmented reality, and then finally Alaska or New Zealand. Like, where should they put their bunkers? And I'm like, dudes, I thought you guys all have rocket ships. And they said, oh, no, we're low-level billionaires. It's Elon Musk and Richard Branson, they can get off the planet. We're going to have to just fortify ourselves with some Navy SEALs and hang on. And I'm like, Navy SEALs? Why do you think the Navy SEALs are going to take care of you after the apocalypse, right? Your money is worthless at that point. And one of them opens his little moleskin book, and he's like, how to pay the security guys after money is worthless. And I realized that here I'm with in theory, the most wealthiest, powerful men I've ever been with in my life, yet they feel utterly powerless to influence the future. Right? That the best thing they can do is get an island or a seasteading platform or upload their brain to the cloud and hang on for the inevitable event. The climate crisis, social unrest, economic crash, electromagnetic pulse, nuclear disaster that takes the whole thing down. And that's why I decided to write this book, to say these guys are crazy. Right? These guys are crazy. They want to earn enough money and build enough technology to escape from the devastation they are causing by earning money and using technology in that way. Right? They want to build a car that can escape from its own exhaust. And you just can't do that. So that's why it's escape fantasies of the tech billionaires. It's not the plans on how you can do it too. You can't escape, right? We're all here together. So that was sort of the, and it's meant as a comedy, right? It's a black comedy. It's like more like Don't Look Up than how to survive. There's only one way to survive, and that's together.
Okay, so we've got, on one hand we have I think there's a dichotomy here. So there's the idea of like a techno-utopianist idea where technology will save us, where eventually we will build a car that escapes our own exhaust.
Right.
And we could equate that with like the horseshit problem, where cities were covered in horseshit in the late 1800s. In 1910, the invention of the car pulled us out of the horseshit. There was no more horses, so you didn't have horseshit. We basically saved the universe at that point.
Right.
Then you have this dystopian view, which is I think also married to the social media view, which is also married to an almost libertarian aspect of this whole thing, where I'm going to get mine and hope you don't die kind of attitude.
Right.
How does a modern entrepreneur walk that line between everything's going to be just fine and everything's going to be awful and I don't care?
Well, the easiest way is, there's two main things that a modern entrepreneur has to do. One is set your sights lower. I go to a lot of business schools to speak, and I'll ask them up front, can you bring yourself to be okay with making only $50 million? Can you do, I know it's hard. You're in here, you're looking at Musk, you're looking at Zuckerberg, but if you can bring yourself down to the humble 50 million, you can run your whole company a different way, right? You don't have to pivot towards extraction and control and surveillance and domination. Look at Mark Zuckerberg. He's trying to give back. He says he's going to give back 90% of his money. What if he had made a 90% less extractive, evil company? Right? He wouldn't have to try to shove 90% back into the economy. It would be like Facebook would be. Imagine if Facebook were a social network. It could have been. You know that little 10% that it is social? It could be the whole thing, right? So that's sort of number one. The second is kind of more economic. It's looking at how can you optimize a company for the circulation of value through the community and marketplace rather than the extraction of value from a marketplace. Most entrepreneurs look at their marketplaces the way a vacuum cleaner looks at dirt. I'm going to take all the money off the table. But when you bankrupt all the businesses and consumers in your marketplace, you've got to then move on to somewhere else, which is part of why they have an escape fantasy. They've got to keep moving on, move on. If instead you think about how can my business work in concert with the economy? How do I go back to Adam Smith? Land, you taught business. Land, labor, and capital, right? There's three factors of production. How am I respecting the land? What's their seat at the table? How am I respecting labor? What's their seat at the table? And capital, rather than just having a VC pluck a kid out of freshman year of college who has a good idea and say, okay, now pivot towards this.
So I've been a journalist for a long time, and I know that humanity is awful.
Only sometimes. They're not. Well, the tech bros think that humanity is awful, right?
Okay.
They think humanity is a problem to be solved with technology. Here we are in the fintech, right? That's what the blockchain is for. Solve for greed, right? Let's substitute for trust with proof of work or proof of this or proof of that. Since when is the problem that I have to prove that I've worked? What would Marx say about proof of work, right? It's like, that's a little odd, right? So no, it's also that flip, right? Don't retrofit solutions to the technology you already have, right? Look at problems in the world and build technologies to solve them. It's tricky.
Explain that a little bit. I think there's a confusion when you talk about retrofit versus build. So to retrofit, the idea is they build the cart out, run the exhaust. What you're talking about is build the like a microbe that eats the exhaust or something completely different. But doesn't that become, again, horseshit problem? The car came along, got rid of all the horses, all the cities were fine, but then the cities got worse because of all the cars. How do we avoid that next step? Or can we?
There's an exact moment. Neil Postman wrote about this in Technopoly. There is a moment where you can choose a different path. So great. We have a car. Car works well. No horse shit. Yay, car. Yay, car. Then GM says, well, our debt structure is such that we'd like 100x or 1,000x returns on this. We have a sustainable business here. We're making some millions of dollars a year, but how do we grow? We've got to sell more cars. So let's get the former CEO of GM to become the Secretary of Defense of the United States and to change the fabric, the landscape of America so that people are now going to work far away from where they live, so they need to buy cars in order to get to work. Now everyone in America is going to have to work 1 day a week just to support their automobile. Let's lobby Congress to get rid of streetcars so that a guy who's been working in a factory all day long, who used to leave the factory, get a beer, get a paper, sit on the streetcar with his friends, and get drunk all the way home. Now, when he's done operating heavy machinery all day, he's going to get into another piece of heavy machinery and work for another hour operating that heavy machinery at his own expense with risk of running someone else over, so he'll buy insurance and will sell more cars, right? So it's resisting that temptation to get people to use the product beyond what they actually need, which is back to the same thing. Settle for the 20 million rather than the 20 billion, and you don't have to go that route.
I like the concept, but we also had the highway system also destroyed the atomic family.
The highway system, and who built that? It was the Defense Department. The justification for the U.S. highway system was that we needed a way to move our missiles back and forth. It was a Defense Department initiative, which is why GM put its former CEO, and it sounds like conspiracy theory, but it's not. This is not even a do the research. Yeah. This is just basic history, not like special history.
So we destroyed the atomic family, but we also created wealth by pulling people out of the countryside into the. We destroyed the agrarian ideal, right? By pulling people out of the countryside into the city, which built this, which for better or worse is kind of cool, I guess.
Better and worse, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's imagine this is our billionaires right here. What are we going to tell them to solve this, to solve the problems that are coming up? And what are the problems coming up? We all know climate change. We all know pandemics so far. Is there anything else? Is there another little group of things we should be worried about? What other horsemen are we expecting?
Well, we could worry about anything. I think the way to talk to those billionaires is to address the problem that they think they have. Right? The problem they think they have is they don't know how to pay their security people, their Navy SEALs, to take care of them after their money is worthless. So you got to say, okay, and this is what I actually told them was, well, maybe you treat those people really well now, and they won't want to kill you. So why don't you find your head of security, pay for his daughter's bat mitzvah today, and it's going to be harder for him to shoot you between the eyes when you're in the bunker tomorrow. And then that initiates a different thinking process of, oh, well, what if I was treating my customers? What if I was treating my environment? What if I was treating the climate in a way that didn't require me to escape from it? So you talk to the guy at Epson Printers. As we all know, you read Cory Doctorow's pieces. He wrote a piece 2 weeks ago documenting how Epson Printers has a printer that bricks itself after a certain number of pages. It's like 5,000 pages, it's bricked. The company argues, oh, we do that because there's a little sponge inside that collects the extra dust from the cartridge, and when it might get filled up by then, and it could drop ink on your desk. But rather than just letting you replace the 2-cent sponge, right, they can charge 40 cents for it if they want, get a 20 times markup. They brick your printer. And there's a guy at the company who knows someone's going to have to send a kid into a mine to get rare earth metals to make the next printer. Someone's going to have to take that printer, send it down to Brazil, and throw it on a toxic waste heap that impoverished families are going to go pick on and get cancer from in order to find renewable parts. I am accelerating the rate at which the planet will die by forcing people to buy more printers, but my margin on selling this extra printer is high enough that I think it will insulate me from that damage. Right? And they've got to make that calculation differently. You can't feed this to everybody and keep your kids in Rudolf Steiner schools and an organic goat share forever, right? Eventually you realize you are in the world too, right? It's and I get it, and it's not evil. We're not talking about evil. My dad used to take us, we moved eventually to Larchmont. He used to drive us down to the Lower East Side where he was raised. Like once a month we'd end up there, and he goes, I was raised in that apartment up there with 9 people, and we all bathed in a bucket in the kitchen, this is, my God, and I worked hard and went to school and earned money so I could I could get out of this neighborhood and raise you somewhere better. God bless, right? You're in a bad neighborhood, what do? Work hard to get out of that neighborhood and somewhere better. But what about when the whole world is your neighborhood? When the whole world is the bad neighborhood? You can't musk it out of here. You've got to actually turn around and say, okay, these are my people, this is the place. Human beings are not cattle to try to herd into my new Skinner box of algorithmic horrors, and treat them like people that I'm going to actually be with.
Okay, we got about 4 minutes. When you wrote that first book that they canceled, the one about the internet, did you expect all this? What did you see? What were you expecting?
I mean, I was never really a futurist, but when I wrote Siberia, Life in the Trenches of Hyperspace, the dominant technoculture periodical was Mondo 2000 magazine. I don't know if you've heard of that. It was a cross between cyberpunk and psychedelics and rave culture and fantasy role-playing and smart drugs.
It was like Burning Man. It was in a book, in a magazine.
Yeah, not
form.
This Burning Man, not today's Burning Man, but Burning Man before Eric Schmidt Burning Man, going in an RV with servants, right. When Burning Man was more like Rainbow Fest or something. It was a different culture. And I thought what would happen, well, it's interesting. I thought at the end of the book, after it had gotten canceled, between when it got canceled and when it got picked up again 6 months later, Wired magazine started. And at the very end of that book, I said, there's a window of opportunity for those of us who want these technologies to be used in a pro-human way to seize the opportunity, to grab onto this new dashboard of creativity and dream or hallucinate the reality that we want. But if we don't seize that opportunity, there's another contingent who are more than willing to take charge of this thing. And I am concerned, if we don't, they will. And they did. But yeah, the thing I would have seen was something much more like, much more female, really. Much more, Brenda Laurel wrote a book way back when, Computers as Theater, and we understood that we could use computers to kind of reenact something, to connect people in a different way, to understand ourselves as part of a collective organism, to retrieve notions like the commons, which capitalists see as a tragedy. The commons is how we got computing. It was shared resources and shareware and shared computing cycles. It was networked. And our understanding of networking was something very different than isolated people. It was learning to work in concert. Something that, I guess I imagined something that would look much more like Occupy Wall Street, which is where Bitcoin actually came out of, if you want to be honest. It was about reimagining economics, not recapitulating capitalism. And that I thought that would happen, and it didn't.
Is there still a chance?
There's always a chance. There's still battery. I suck battery life out of those things. There's always a chance. There's always a chance. It's going to happen one way or the other. It's going to happen because we choose it, or it's going to happen because we got to start sharing stuff. That's the only way we're going to make it through. Right now, if you got a hole in the wall, you're going to go to Home Depot and buy a minimum viable product drill. It's going to last 6 months to make your hole. What you got to learn to do is to go to your neighbor Joe, who has a great big metal drill, and you can borrow it. And yes, you're going to owe him something, but owing him something is the fabric of community, and that's what we're going to have to learn to do, and we will, because the majority of people are not going to be able to afford this new Gini number that we're moving towards.
All right, remember, two areas down. He's selling the book. I want you to get it. I read it. It was great, and
he was very giving, wasn't he? He was so generous with you'd let me talk so much.
I don't care.
You're
the smarter guy here.
No.
I don't know anything.
You platformed me, which I appreciate.
That's all. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to make you look good.
I'll talk to anybody, but we got to do it down there, so you're feeling guilty about not buying a book.
Yeah, you have to feel guilty about not buying the book. He's got to sell at least 50 of these, or he can't go home.
Congratulate them on their baby. My God, look at that little thing.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's give him a round of applause.